Ah yes, the great power that is nostalgia drives us all to the things that we once did as children, recapturing that sense of wonder from yesteryears and making us feel young and carefree again. Lately, Activision has been capitalizing on this feeling heavily with the Crash and Spyro remasters, but here's where things change for me. I never played any of those franchises as a child, so I don't have any sort of bias about them. With that in mind, this review will be from the point of view of a newcomer to the series. To make things slightly simpler for me, I will be splitting this review into 4 parts. First off, Spyro the Dragon, then Spyro 2, then Year of the Dragon, and finally my thoughts on the whole package. So let's dive right into Spyro The Reignited Trilogy. So let's start with Spyro the Dragon. The game opens off with some of the dragons being interviewed, and when the reporter asks about Nasty Nork, the dragon says he is an ugly, simple-minded creature who poses no threat to the Dragon Kingdom. Being offended by this, Nasty Nork uses a spell that traps the dragons inside Crystal. As Spyro is a smaller dragon, he doesn't get affected by the spell, and so he is tasked with freeing all his dragon brethren and stopping Nork's soldiers from taking over the Dragon Kingdom. From this point on, there isn't much more story to speak of, as the first Spyro is as simple as you can get for a platformer. But this is in no way a bad thing. In no time, you are dropped into a beautiful hub world with a couple of levels that you can choose from, and the action and fun never really stop from there. And since I mentioned it, let's talk about the game's visuals for a bit. I have nothing to compare them to since I never played the original, but as a PS4 game, it's just gorgeous. The characters' movements and animations are perfect, and even the grass being burned for a second when you fire breathe is such a cute and nice detail that really stands out. Everything is very bright and colorful and stands out in some way. It's clear that it was crafted with love and care put into it, and this really impressed me. Another thing that really amazed me is that the level design still holds up to today's standards. I was afraid, since it was based on an old game, that it wouldn't be very fun to explore, and Spyro is all about exploring and collecting, so it could have easily ruined the game for me. However, it was a very pleasant surprise that every level was fun to explore. There's plenty of varied locales with lots of secrets and things to do. Speaking of which, in these levels you have 2 main objectives: to save the dragons and collect gems. Occasionally, a level will have a skill point to complete. These unlock game art for viewing and don't really affect your game in any way. I guess every time you complete one, you get an extra life, but that's about it. Skill points don't even count for your overall completion. What counts to this completion is the gems, which in this game don't have much of a use except for collectathon purposes. The gems can be found by Sparks, Spyro's dragonfly sidekick that with the push of a button points out the direction of the closest gem. Sparks is also the indicator of health, with every color indicating a different state. If you get hit too much, Sparks will vanish and one hit will kill you. You can get health back by attacking innocent animals and making Sparks eat the butterfly that gets out. And of course, the dragons, which serve as the main driving force to the game's paper-thin narrative. I'm going to jump the gun here, but the dragons are my favorite collectibles in the Reignited Trilogy. The orbs of the second game don't have the same charm, and the eggs on the third one don't quite land with me. I just love the different designs of the dragons, and in the little time you can see them, they still portray a personality. It actually feels like they existed before you, and even though you won't see them again, they will still live on. Their cutscenes are short and sweet, giving you useful tips or information, for the most part at least.
Spyro, it's great to see you, but I gotta go.
Spyro also controls great, and that really helps the levels feel fun and dynamic. The speed in which you can go through them is phenomenal, and it's a joy to experience. Sometimes it's hard for me to evaluate what I can and cannot reach while in flight, and I didn't really find a use for the roll ability, but other than that I have no complaints about how this game plays and the flow in which you can get yourself on. There are also hidden flight levels and boss fights that help break the repetitive nature of the game. The flying levels are fun and work almost like a puzzle. In these, you actually fly and have to collect, so to speak, at least 4 different sets of things, whether it's fly through rings, destroy planes, or burn vultures. years, it's always a bit different since you are timed and every time you pass one of the obstacles you get more time for the next one. If you go back to the levels after beating them, you don't have a timer counting down anymore, so you can play them for as long as you want and finish anything else you need on these levels. As for the bosses, I don't have much to say about them. Once you know how to beat them, they're a breeze and not very inspired. That being said though, I do love the boss designs, always fun and goofy in a whimsical way, just like the enemies in general, which also look great and varied. Seriously, all levels that I can remember have unique looking enemies, even if they do fit into a type. Not everything is roses and hugs though. I found the swamp levels in general to be disappointing and annoying. Of course, you can't really talk about annoying without talking about Treetops, a level from the before mentioned swamp. I felt lost and disoriented, not really having fun with it. I had to look up a guide for this level as I was not being able to pass it at all. In fact, it was the closest I got to game over, leaving me with 0 lives, making me leave the level and trying later. There's not much else I can say about this one. There is a bonus level if you collect everything and you get an extra cutscene, but that is all. In the end, Spyro the Dragon is a fun and simple game. It delivered what I wanted and it felt very modern level design wise thanks to its big open levels. Spyro 2 takes a bit of a different approach in the story department, actually having recurring characters other than Spyro and Sparks, and many more cutscenes that last longer than 5 seconds. This time around, Spyro and Sparks are tired of all the rainy weather of their land, so they decide to go on vacations to Dragon Shores. After going to the portal, Spyro ends up in Avalar, a land with no dragons. It is there that he meets Elora, Hunter, and the Professor, who ask him for help. You need to defeat the evil wizard Ripto that took over the land after he was mistakenly summoned through a portal alongside his 2 minions Crush and Gulp. Spyro agrees to help and our adventure starts. Right off the bat, you will notice each level has its own unique NPCs that talk to you and tell you there is something wrong and they need your help. There is also little cutscenes that play in the beginning and end of a level. These make you feel like you actually helped the people of this land and are pretty entertaining to watch. Inside of the actual levels this time around, there's missions given to you by the NPCs. Some of these require different power-ups that are actually blocked until you defeat enough enemies in the respective levels, and or permanent upgrades that are purchased with the gems this time. But let me explain this last one. Gems in Ripto's Rage need to be given to Moneybags, a money-hungry NPC that blocks your path, levels, and teaches you different abilities, such as swimming and head stomp. This gives the gems a purpose, making them much more alluring to collect. Also, if like me, you were worried about it, in the end of the game, you'll get all your gems back. These abilities even translate to the hub areas that have things that can only be accessed with them. These areas are huge this time around, but there's only 3 of them, 4 if you count the bonus level in the end of the game. It can get a bit overwhelming because there's so many levels inside of each of these areas, but for the most part, I think they're fun and well designed. The dragons were replaced with orbs and artifacts. You need both to continue the storyline. Halfway through the game, the artifacts get replaced by orbs. I thought this was a weird choice, but nothing major. As I said before, I prefer the dragons, but the trade-off is that the entire second game has more characters than the first one. The flying levels are back, but this time around you can go back after beating them to play an extra mission. Once again, these were fun, and the extra missions, including the ones on the main levels, are welcome additions that diversify even more the gameplay. One thing that I think didn't really improve are the boss fights. Only 3 exist in this game, and they are lengthy and boring. I didn't enjoy them at all, and I would have just preferred to have them as they were in the first game. Sure, they're more complex, but to me that didn't translate into a better experience, only a more annoying one. So once you get the infinite fire breath from 100%ing the game, these boss fights are completely trivialized. It's about time we wrap Ripto's Rage up by talking endgame. This time around you finally go on vacations to Dragon Shores and get greeted with a couple of minigames. These give you coins. If you have enough coins, you unlock a theater mode where you can see all the cutscenes in the game. And if you collect all orbs and gems, you unlock the infinite fire breath, which makes the game even easier and makes all trophies and skill points that you might have left a breeze to get. Spyro 2 Ripto's Rage is just a bigger, more ambitious game than its predecessor, and for the most part I think it succeeds in improving and upgrading itself, and I was pleased with its evolution. Also, water levels suck, and that is all I have to say. On to Spyro 3. I would really love to say that Year of the Dragon is a big departure from its predecessor, but it is not. It's more of everything with a few new ideas thrown into the mix. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the setup. Spyro, Sparx, and Hunter are celebrating the Year of the Dragon with the other dragons, when a sorceress called Bianca shows up with an army of rhino creatures and steals the dragon eggs. Since Spyro and Hunter are the only ones that fit through the rabbit holes Bianca made, they are tasked with bringing back all 150 dragon eggs. Where do I start with this one? Honestly, this was my least favorite Spyro game. Maybe it was the fatigue of playing all of them back to back, or maybe it was just because I felt like this game was the most dragged out, but it just didn't click with me. The gameplay is the same, even down to the useless roll, but where this game shines is on the plethora of side levels and mini-games. Year of the Dragon has new playable characters that lead to new playstyles and opportunities, and for the most part, this is the part of the game that I appreciated the most. Variety is much appreciated when you binge series, but even that couldn't save this one for me. Although the foundations are all the same, I found the levels to be much longer and dragged out. If I was just playing it and moving on, it would have been fine, but I told myself I was going to 100% all of them, and I did it, and this made me spend a lot of time in each level. I don't feel like there is much to say about this one that hasn't been said previously. The levels are just big, the gameplay feels nice, and the bosses are just meh, except for the twin dragon boss fight. These were tedious. Another problem I had was that this is the buggiest Spyro game in my opinion, especially on the races. Oh boy, the races. Now I'm remembering all the things that made me dislike this one. The races are honestly the worst for me, and I really felt like they weren't a good addition. Both in the ground levels and in the flying levels, I just didn't find them fun at all. Speaking of flying levels, they were the easiest they have ever been. Sparx just blatantly tells you which things to do in which order. Figuring that out for me was part of the fun, and sure, you can play it however you want, but when you don't need high scores and are time constricted like me, then I don't find a reason to experiment. The races, on the other hand, I found it kinda hard, but not in a good way. I don't have much else to say. There's a few more things like how the eggs I found repetitive and not as satisfying as the dragons, how there's a secret ending that was not as fun as either of the endgames of previous games, and how although the characters are interesting, they don't get used enough. But I don't want to keep complaining about this one. Also, you finally get to beat up moneybags and it's glorious. In the end, it's more of the same. I just didn't like some of the additions. I could understand why this would be people's favorites since it has everything the others had and more, but it didn't click with me. Good, but not very good for me. So what did I think of the package overall? It's a great package with lots of content. I took about 35 hours to 100%. Oh, wait, sorry, no. 120% the first one, 100% the second one, and 117% the third one. Not really sure why these random percentages, but whatever. For its price and how much more it will probably drop, it's a no-brainer for platformer fans. Just do yourself a favor and don't marathon them. It makes them much more tedious. All things considered, I think Ripto's Rage is the best one, then Spyro the Dragon, and finally Year of the Dragon. But that's just my opinion. Regardless, I don't think it will disappoint anyone as it was clearly made with love for the franchise, and both newcomers and veterans alike will find enjoyment in Spyro Reignited Trilogy. One last bomb before I go, I didn't really enjoy the music in any of them. It's boring at best and extremely repetitive. Even though all levels have their own track, I quickly felt annoyed with them. That is all. We're done here, finally. Honestly, this was a lot of fun, but it took a really long time, so I would really appreciate a like and a subscribe if you want more. And see you next time, and thanks for watching.